On November 22, 2012, a 911 call shattered the calm of a quiet Madison County neighborhood in Indiana. The caller was a distraught 31-year-old woman named Emily Carter. She had just returned home from work to find her husband, Daniel, unconscious on their living room floor. Paramedics were on the scene within minutes, but it was too late. 34-year-old Daniel Carter was pronounced dead. The medical examiner later determined the cause of death was a sudden, massive cardiac arrest. At first, the scene presented no red flags. There were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry, and nothing of value was missing from the home. It appeared to be a tragic, but natural death. However, Daniel's young age and his lack of any known heart conditions were just unusual enough to warrant a standard, procedural search of the house. So, the police began to document the property. Officers moved through the home, methodically clearing and documenting each space. The living room, where Daniel was found, the kitchen, 2 bedrooms, the bathroom, the attached garage. They took photographs and wrote detailed notes, following protocol to the letter. Everything was by the book. With no evidence of foul play, the case was officially closed within 48 hours. 3 months later, Emily Carter moved out, and the house sat empty, a silent witness to a family's sudden loss. For years, the file on Daniel Carter's death gathered dust. Then, in 2019, it was pulled from the archives. The case wasn't reopened because of new evidence or a tip from a witness. It was reopened because of a routine internal audit. Detective Aaron Whitfield, a veteran officer with a keen eye for detail, was assigned to review a batch of old sudden death cases, just to check for procedural accuracy. As he sifted through the files, Daniel Carter's case stood out, not because of a crime scene photo or a witness statement, but because of something much more mundane. The house diagram drawn by the responding officers. The diagram clearly showed 6 rooms, but when Whitfield cross-referenced this with the official county property records, he found a discrepancy. The records listed 7 rooms. At first, he brushed it off as a simple clerical error. Mistakes happen, but something nagged at him. He decided to pull the original building permit for the house, which included the architect's floor plan, and that's when he saw it. The plans confirmed there were, in fact, 7 rooms. The one missing from the police report was a small room located at the very end of the main hallway. The floor plan labeled it simply as storage. This was more than a clerical error. Whitfield went back to the original case file, searching for any mention of this room. He scoured the officer's notes. Nothing. He examined every single crime scene. Photo. Nothing. There were no evidence tags from that area. No report entries. Not even a single line stating the room had been cleared or was empty. It wasn't that the room was searched poorly. It was that, according to every piece of documentation, the room didn't exist. It was never searched because it was never acknowledged. Puzzled, Whitfield decided to track down the original responding officers. He discovered one had since retired, another had transferred to a different state, and a third officer declined to comment on the case. None of them could recall a storage room. Their memory and their reports all ended at the solid wall at the end of the hall. The mystery deepened. How could an entire room just vanish from a police investigation? In March of 2020, 7 years after Daniel Carter's death, police obtained a warrant to re-enter the property. The house was still vacant, owned by a bank, and caught in administrative limbo. Detective Whitfield walked through the front door into a time capsule of dust and silence. Furniture left by a subsequent owner remained draped in shadows. He walked down the main hallway, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. He reached the end, where the diagram showed a blank wall. But as he stood there, he noticed something was off. The texture of the paint was subtly different from the rest of the hallway. It was just a little newer, a little smoother. Then he looked down at the baseboard. It wasn't a perfect match with the rest of the trim. There was a tiny, almost invisible seam. Driven by a hunch, Whitfield pressed his hand firmly against the center of the wall. It didn't budge. He pressed again, this time near the mismatched baseboard. The panel gave way slightly. It moved. Behind this perfectly disguised panel was a narrow, hidden door. There was no lock, no doorknob, no handle of any kind, just a faint, vertical line betraying its existence. He pulled it open. The room behind the door was tiny, barely a closet. It was just wide enough for a person to stand in, but not much else. There were no windows and no light fixture, plunging the space into near-total darkness. But as his eyes adjusted, Whitfield saw that the floor was strangely worn in one specific spot. compressed and indented, as if someone had stood there for countless hours, day after day. He ran his flashlight along the walls and saw something that sent a chill down his spine. The drywall was covered in faint marks. They weren't scratches or gouges, they were impressions, hundreds of them, perfectly matching the length and shape of human fingers, pressed into the wall. They were too shallow to be damage, but far too deliberate to be accidental. It was the pattern of someone bracing themselves, or perhaps pushing, over and over again. Then Whitfield noticed the most unsettling detail of all. From inside this tiny dark space, you could see out. A narrow, almost imperceptible gap in the doorframe, invisible from the hallway, created a perfect, hidden peephole. The viewing angle was precise. It looked directly down the hall, with a clear line of sight into the living room, the exact spot where Daniel Carter had died. With this discovery, Detective Whitfield rushed back to the station and pulled the original crime scene photos once more. He began examining them with a new perspective, looking not just at the primary evidence, but at the periphery, the reflections, the shadows, and that's when he found it. In one of the photos of Daniel's body, the television screen in the living room was visible. It was turned off, a black, reflective mirror, and in that reflection, he saw it. A detail that every single person had overlooked for 7 years. Reflected in the dark screen, just behind where Daniel lay, was the hallway. And at the end of that hallway was a dark, vertical shape. A line. It was too narrow to be a person, too tall and thin to be furniture. It was the faint outline of the hidden door, the door that no one knew was there. It had been captured in a single photograph, hiding in plain sight all along. The next step was to contact the widow, Emily Carter. Now living in another state, she was reluctant to talk about that painful time in her life. But when Whitfield gently pressed her about the house, she told him something he never expected. She said Daniel had started complaining about the house in the months before he died. He would say the hallway felt crowded at night, that the house somehow felt smaller when it was dark. He couldn't explain it, and she dismissed it as stress from work. When Whitfield asked her specifically about the end of the hallway, she paused. She admitted she never really looked at it, never thought about it. She didn't remember there being anything there at all. Just a wall. It was a part of the house she had simply never registered. The medical examiner reviewed the new information, but ultimately, the official cause of death remained unchanged: cardiac arrest. There was no way to prove what had caused it. However, a new haunting note was added to the final report. It read, "Psychological stressors present, environmental factors unknown." The case was quietly archived for a second time. The hidden room was officially sealed by the authorities. Not demolished, not structurally altered, just closed. The panel was put back in place, leaving the house just as it was. The house was sold later that year. The real estate listing made no mention of a 7th room. As far as anyone knows, the new owners have lived there peacefully, with no reported incidents. But a strange footnote remains in the public record. According to city inspection files, every annual safety inspection of the property since 2020 has included the same curious, recurring line. End hallway wall appears unchanged. No one ever writes what's behind it, and no one ever asks. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as unsettling as we did, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more mysteries that lie just beneath the surface. Stay curious.